Pip and I are going to do a tag team today. I'm doing 1 and 3, Pip's doing 2 and 4. I feel as though we've done it all because we did do it all. But anyway, yeah. When we, one of our first things we started with is with the framework. We worked at a very high level to start with. So we worked on our vision, which we seek to achieve, and then we agreed on a definition of sustainability. We ran this definition through, the same stakeholder groups that we did a lot of other things with too, and within industry and a bit of outside of industry, just to make sure that we're all singing the same song. Again, and this is interesting, that so many of the frameworks have come up with the same answers, which means we're probably all on the right track. But we came up with we divided into the 4 main pillars. We came up with the 6 key priorities, and as I said earlier this morning, the stakeholder groups we worked with within industry and outside of industry, as they all came together, it was interesting they came up with the first 5 and didn't come up with health and safety of people in the industry. And in any business and any industry, people is just so important. Anyway, so we put our steering group committee that's in charge of it, put that in and made sure that was there because we thought it was that important. Just as a brief indication of, the timing, although we didn't start till 2016 with the actual framework, we started the process back in 2011. It was also about the same time that Cattle Council of Australia, which I'm Vice Chair of, joined the Global Roundtable Sustainable Beef. We hit it, the work that was going on behind, as you see there, 2015 Deloitte undertook a review to understand the data that existed against the technical review that we put up, and we also did a lot of work around social licence. So that was happening. But just prior to that, Cattle Council took a hammering from a couple of senators, and the political situation meant that we changed what we did, and it moved to a different body. And I haven't said this before, but I think we're actually in a better position because of that. So out of adversity, I think has come a good result. Because now, I'm just thinking back in the early days of Cattle Council, it was very much producer-focused, sustainability being producer-focused. We're now whole of industry, and I think that has been probably a really good gain that we didn't expect that just came out of adversity, as I said, and I think that's a good result. We ran a consultation period over 14 months before our first report was released last year, and then we had our first annual update at Beef 2018, which is in Rocky in Queensland. It was a good way of doing it because the beef's a big week in Rockhampton, and every cattleman who thinks he's a big cattleman wants to be there. So it was a good way of actually getting through to people and having producer engagement. So how's the framework used? Our industry uses the framework to advise industry where investment in research, development and adoption is required to deliver on the goal of continual improvement. The timing of this is very opportune. Our last 5-year strategic plan for the red meat industry in Australia it comes up in 2020. So we're at that bit past the midpoint. We're now looking at the next strategic plan, and what we've got here is some really good research into, what's required, what's important. So it will help guide our next strategic plan, and it's just the timeliness of it. It's appropriate, and it's a good base to start from. There'll be a lot of other engagement in that process, but this is a key tool that we can use. Fostering constructive relationship with stakeholders is what the framework has been most effective in delivering to industry to date. As an industry, we have moved significantly to open the door to different stakeholders to invite their input on how industry should address certain issues. And in some ways, I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but in some ways this has been sort of really good for the industry to actually engage, and it hasn't addressed some of our social licence issues, but like the live export, but it's got people talking, and the information that I'm getting back from people who've been in those say, yeah, they want to come back again. They want to be there again next time because they thought it was good. So we know that to access markets and gain access to finance, that proof of our sustainability credentials is required. It was covered this morning by the Rabobank, And it's continually coming up. In Australia, Rabobank's the big agri bank, but we then have the big four, and two of them are really starting to make big noises around sustainability being part of it. And they have been for some time, but they're not quite sure how to do it yet. So, but they're looking at this and they're looking at other things, so it'll only grow. And of course the framework is used to help promote the good work as well as acknowledge what further work is required. So, you know, we were doing that a little bit, and I think we've still got a long way to go to address the social licence issues, again, particularly around live export, but over the whole red meat sector. We need to actually think about how we're going to do this more, and I believe this framework will give us a good sort of base to work on. Briefly, as I said, Cattle Council was initially involved, but with the political turmoil, it was handed on to Red Meat Advisory Council. Now, Red Meat Advisory Council consists of Cattle Council, so cattle, sheep, goats, live export, lot feeders, and the processing industry. So everyone's in that body. And so it was a good place for actually everyone to take it on. So RMAC is the sort of the lead body. The Sustainability Steering Group we've formed underneath it, which I've been a part of, and Pip is our secretariat. And that's where we've sort of done the groundwork to engage and keep going. Underneath that, we've had the consultative committees where we've actually got those stakeholders in and worked with them. The technical experts, we've always been, if we can't do something, we've said, well, let's get some technical experts in. And the one that is most obvious at the moment and we've done is the balance of tree and grass cover. We just didn't have the data around what is needed there. So we've pulled in some industry experts and put them together and said, come up with what it is. And they're in the process of starting that. So well, they've been going a little while yet. We haven't quite moved too far yet. Industry service companies is providing the support. So PIP's with MLA. Now, one of the things that's interesting is, and I say this because I don't know what other countries do, but this is funded by a compulsory levy on sales of livestock. So for cattle it's $5, bobby calves is obviously smaller. The sheep people are in there too, and so are the goats. But in that $5 levy, $3.60 is for marketing, which goes to MLA. 95 cents goes to R&D, which is managed by MLA as well. The meat processors have a levy on their slaughter, so that's how they're funded, and live caught the same. And so this process is funded out of those levies. So it's industry funded, which is good. And the bottom layer is, well, not the bottom layer, but this is where this is where it's going: the producers, processors, feedlotters, and transport. Pip.
Thanks. So I guess I just wanted to share with you some of our consumer insights, because this morning it was really good to hear that we need to put the consumer first, and I kind of reflected on that thinking almost 10 years ago I was brought into the industry to, I guess, tell people how it is that we produce beef and correct that misinformation out there. And now we've really moved to understanding what consumer concerns are and responding. So we've tracked this over the last 9 years, and specifically looking at concerns around animal welfare and environment. So I just kind of wanted to share that with you because I think everyone always loves some consumer insights. So firstly, given the nature of this conversation, is beef sustainably produced? And so this research we're looking at here, this is just our Australian domestic market, but we undertake similar but not as extensive research in our key export markets. So whilst it's around 50% agreeing that it is sustainable production, what we're really interested in here is that kind of yellow bar running through the middle there. And that's really the group of people that could be influenced either to continue to feel good about buying beef, or that may be pushed down into disagreeing and perhaps reducing their consumption. So when we've looked across the 9 years of reasons for eating less red meat, probably not surprisingly, is the cost comes up as the first reason, followed by concerns around impact on health for yourself and for your family. And then we see these areas of animal welfare and environment, and they kind of tend to move between each other, and to the far right there you see the net of the two. And it's fairly stable at around 5%. And for us, with the framework as well as our various community engagement programs, that's a key metric that we aim to maintain. So looking at the key reasons of people that are saying they're actively reducing their consumption, it really mirrors that slide just before, where it's cost, health, and then these other areas of what the community sees as sustainability. But for vegetarians and people that have recently become vegetarians, the order changes. So up top there is concern for animal welfare, and then environment, and then below that is nutrition. I always like this slide when I'm talking to different groups of producers to show that, you know, it's not all bad. We do bring people back. So people that have been vegetarian, 15% of them are coming back, and the main reason is health concerns or health reasons. And I think we always need to remember the good things that beef has, and the fact that we're producing a whole nutritious food. We've always got to be proud of that and be actively promoting that as well. And it's important in sustainability, clearly. So looking ahead, we want to look at the next generation. So millennials are currently the youngest main grocery buyer, so they're anywhere between 22 and 37 at the moment. And you'll see compared to the generations before them that they are looking at ethical reasons and environmental reasons higher. And this particular piece of research here that we've pulled this out from is when we've been exploring the likely impacts of synthetic and alternative meat products. So we're asking them why would they try those products and what are their key drivers. So looking at if people have concerns, where in the value chain those concerns are, and it's really around the transportation and the sections that are more public facing for the industry. I think a lot of the work that happens in the GRSB and certainly the framework, we're really focused with on-farm. And to me, that's great because we're being quite proactive and saying that this is likely to become more of an issue, and let's get on the front foot and address some of these emerging concerns. I think a lot of the discussions I've had over the last 2 days, regardless of which region and regardless of whether you're a developing or a developed economy, is, you know, who's going to pay for this? And some countries might have subsidies that might be paying for some ecosystem services. You know, we're very lucky in Australia to have our producer levy that we can use for research and adoption. But, you know, longer term, we need, you know, the customer or the consumer to ultimately pay for it. And this is a bit of a signal that perhaps that's something, but there's a lot of literature in the sustainability area that what people obviously say they're going to do and what they do are two different things. But we're all keeping a close eye on that. Just to skip over this one, and again, when I'm talking to producers, when you look at some of that research, and particularly when you're just looking at social media headlines, it's easy to get a bit down on people turning against you. But for us, overwhelmingly, people feel great about eating red meat, and they just want to continue to do that. You know, it's an integral part of our society as Australians. We love a barbecue. Spaghetti bolognese is our #1 meal, etc. So I think we've got to, again, continue to be proud of that and keep pushing it. So our framework approach is very much a stakeholder initiative. So we're working both with industry groups from an industry perspective to spread that message through, and also those stakeholder groups, including banks, institutional investors, government, NGOs, and of course retailers. But when we ask consumers about the framework, they're interested in finding out. Well, half of them are, so that's okay. But, you know, 60% are thinking that makes us feel confident that industry is doing the right thing. You know, we don't necessarily care to look into the detail, but the fact that it's happening makes us feel a bit more confident. And importantly for us as an industry, we've had a bit of pushback on certain groups being involved in the process. But, you know, you see there 63% of consumers feel more confident knowing that those groups are at the table. And that's been really useful for us to help promote that back into industry and to try and, I guess, get around any of the fear from working with different groups. So when we did start our process of collaboration, and as Tony said, we had about 14 months where we spoke to industry, external, and then we also had a round of online public consultation. To start with, both because of practicality of getting around to see everyone, we kind of segmented groups into who was most likely to be constructive. So we actively sat down with those groups that we thought were most likely to be constructive, but we certainly didn't exclude the others. And everyone on that slide was emailed, contacted for comment on our framework as we developed it. So we've now established this formal consultative committee process. As you can see there, we've got some industry groups as well as external. And this is a formal process. We meet with them twice a year. And I guess in my role, I talk with most of them on a much more frequent basis. So I'll hand back to Tony.
Thanks, Pip. Right, so some of the highlights of the process so far. Since the framework was launched in April 2017, we've released the first general report in Rocky at beef. The issue of vegetation management, I've been talking about it. It's politically charged. Different states, different situations, and a different national agenda as well. So it is quite difficult for us. Recognising this, the steering group has sought the views of our country's leading ecologists, remote sensing and production experts to advise on definition approaches to measurements and revised indicators for this key priority area. For industry, establishing such a group and transparently working through what are quite sensitive issues is a really good achievement and something that shows the maturity of the approach to where we were a few years ago. And as Pip's just said, I think it gives strength, or gives recognition that we're doing it for the right reasons. Mentioned before, it was a highlight to work so cooperative with stakeholders to firstly identify the 23 priority areas and then work on narrowing our short to medium term focus down to the 6 priority areas. This has set us a clear path where to focus our attention. I've talked earlier about this morning about my pet topic maybe about the pole gene. Also the use of pain relief. Some of the 2 main pain relief products that have only just been approved in Australia in 2016, and there's been significant uptake. But I'm really pleased to see that, the pole gene there, that it's changing and it's moving in the right direction. I don't have the numbers on me for what has changed over the last 5 years, but the report I read this morning in Beef Central saying that significant premium for polled bulls at the sales in the bull sales in the north this currently going on now is great. First, acknowledging the concern around antimicrobial resistance, the industry has also established a proactive antibiotic monitoring program in feedlots. Our lot feeding sector in Australia is not big like the US or Canada, and it's small enough for these people to realise there's a problem and deal with it. And so their stewardship program is quite good, and that's going to give us some good information into our framework. Our meats, from the economic perspective, our Meat Standards Australia program, which is the world's first and is the world's leading eating quality approach, has been delivering returns back to the farm gate, as well as providing our consumers assurance of when they buy Australian beef it will eat well. It also gives us a fair bit of information back in data, because it is data that they're collecting back for if we want to use it in our framework. Our flagship approach to adoption has shown a 30% boost in producer knowledge and skills. We are now exploring how to further weave sustainability into this program. We talked about, and with the carbon neutral 2030, it's very important to us. It's quite, as I said, it's out there and we're going to go for it. We're already trending in the right direction, and we're proud of a commitment to pursue carbon neutrality, and we feel confident with a 45% reduction since our baseline year of 2005, which aligns with the Paris Agreement. In our feedlotting industry, we have established a proactive antibiotic, the stewardship one that I was talking about. This approach aligns with the 5 R's: responsibility, review, reduce, refine, replace. One of the key steps we've taken over the past year is to undertake a basic stocktake to understand all of the activity underway and to remove duplication and identify gaps. This was across industry bodies, government groups and private companies, not just in one level of industry. We looked across research addressing the key areas, adopting programs in place, and data and industry integrity systems. The stakeholder groups coming together is an interesting thing, and I quite like it. It's, most of the stakeholder groups that we thought were antagonistic to us, or a little bit, were single issue groups. But bringing them into the room and putting them with other single interest groups and having them hear each other makes them realise the complexity of our industry and the complexity of the chain, the value chain. And so it's been a good process, and I think they've got a lot of, we've also found that we've got a lot of friends, more than we thought. what we thought were antagonistic have not turned out to be in some cases. So that's good. I mentioned earlier this morning too that going back to our producer base, it's repetition, it's repetition, it's repetition. We've got a long way to go there, so we need to keep working on it. But the one thing that we do know is that there needs to be a driver, and it's usually money at the farm gate that's going to drive it appropriately.
Okay, so that's a little bit of where we've been, and I thought we'd just obviously finish off with where we're heading and as Australian framework approach. So, as I said, we've really been focused on key stakeholders, both within industry and external, and next we're looking at how do we actually translate the framework and make it relevant at a farm level. So, as Tony said, we have a number of programs that we have a different adoption. We've got like our best management practice programs as well as commercial supply chain programs. But how do we actually get the word down to properties that consumer is king, there's changing expectations, and importantly, this is what that means for your particular business. And in Australia, we've got quite a different geographic range, obviously, and even amongst the different sections of the country, there's almost different value sets. So within the steering group, we've had a number of discussions around we almost need to develop different dialects depending on who we're talking to and in which regions of the country. So that's what we're currently exploring and spending a fair bit of time. And as well as the consumer research, we're also doing a lot of research into producers and understanding, I guess, those values drivers and how to move and get better adoption. Likewise, we have a number of programs that are targeting at the consumer end, and it ranges from very high level, great food, a bit of subtle sustainability messaging. Then we've got our curious consumers where we have a bit more of that detail, and the framework sits below that. And that kind of connection in the middle there with my nice ugly brown arrows is connecting the producer to the consumer, but also the other way back. So just a little bit of a look at our timeline of where we're heading. We've been focusing on that producer awareness. Firstly, what is the framework? Why on earth are we doing it? And one of the best ways we found to do that is to work with our retail partners and also banking partners for them to be talking about why it's important in their businesses. And that really gets the message through, to Tony's point before, kind of with the checkbook, money talks in industry. We've had a long history of great adoption programs on farm, and there's sustainability weaved in there at the moment, but we're looking certainly to upweight that, and certainly with our carbon neutral plan, our focus is all around adoption and getting better uptake of what we already know in the short term is our kind of get out of the gates with our CN30 program. And then we are starting to look at, okay, we've got our top-down report card. Is there a role for on-farm verified systems across the industry? And I guess importantly, recognising that there are already systems there that are being led by particular brands that align with the framework. So I think to finish with, we've kind of looked at this maintaining community trust, and I think Australia's got our own domestic approach to that. But one of the things we're really excited to be at the GRSB for this week is to understand how we can all address these issues together, because it really is a pre-competitive space. Bad news in one country travels pretty quickly to the other. We're all suffering the same negative messages, and I think that's the value that this group can really bring forward, is how we can continue to, I guess, gain that trust and ensure a sustainable industry. So I guess just to finish, whilst the Australian approach is different to some of the roundtable approaches, we really see that we're on the same road, and on the same road as everyone else in this room here. We've really taken the time to get it right through that multi-stakeholder engagement and to take the direction from consumers, customers, other key influencers on what are the key issues now and what the key issues will be into the future. Our next focus is on that producer engagement, and we also know and acknowledge that's the hardest. I think we all feel, particularly in the sustainability steering group, that there's been a lot of heavy lifting just to get to this point. But now that we've got our outcomes measures established, how do we drive change? And that's a real challenge.